Hey, hey, ho, ho, welcome to the show. Hey, 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 ho, ho, welcome. Alright.
Good Mythical Morning.
Today's Good Mythical Morning.
Thank you for making
Good Mythical Morning. The number of videos.
That is right. Starting today, each Good Mythical Morning.
Stick around for Good Mythical More today. We're actually going to address some specific comments or just some things that we've seen, some threads that we've seen in the comments. So we'll just have a more candid conversation.
My
about
mind
things.
meme, and that's Steven Crowder, or as I like to call him, Steven Piece of Crowder. He's a podcaster at TCU who sat outside.
My name came out of your mouth there at Rhett and Link, Good Mythical Morning. That's the only reason that I responded. And so I responded to Steven Piece of Shit Crowder underneath the video. I want to make sure
we decided to do. When we all have this thing, we've met the goal, and they've been shipped to us, and we're holding the clearly Canadian bottles in our hand, we are setting
It
up
won't look like this. It won't be in a mug.
a live streaming video event where we're going to all toast in unison and drink this.
Maybe in all of these years I just missed it. Maybe there was a video that I didn't watch, or maybe there was a Facebook post that I didn't see and I just missed it. So I did a little digging online, and it seems like a lot of people missed it. I'm guessing because it never actually happened. I have a bunch of links saved on my phone.
Hey, Rhett. Are you sad?
To start off, I'd like to clarify that this video is not going to be on the history of Rhett and Link, or their YouTube channel, so if you're looking for information on how Dope Zebra coincides with the rise of the Obama administration, you may have to wait for another one. Now before we jump right into this, we're going to need to know a little ground floor information. So, just to clarify, Rhett, tall one with a beard. Link, less tall, still tall. Had a beard at one point, but doesn't anymore. Now if you ever get confused as to who I'm talking about whenever I show both of them on screen, just keep in mind your 675-day streak in German Duolingo.
Rechts, links.
Now the story of Good Mythical Morning begins, as most stories do, with a hedge bust of an historical abolitionist, Good Morning Chia Lincoln. This was a very clear predecessor to the Good Mythical Morning format, where our friendos would talk about random news stories and events that happened to them. Now you may be thinking this doesn't sound very entertaining. Well it was, so stop being so critical all the time. Specifically the times when they would talk about ideas they have, or events that happened to them. For the time, this idea was pretty revolutionary, and by pretty, I mean I'm pretty sure other people were doing it in 2011, but no one did it as well as they could. Granted, the videos were less than 10 minutes, which removed the listen in the background nature that you can find in their later videos. But at the time, people didn't think making videos that were extremely listen-toable was a worthwhile concept. However, the algorithm would soon prove otherwise. But before that happened, tragedy struck. The awful grip of death tightened ceaselessly in all our proverbial throats, and much like the real Abraham Lincoln, death's squeeze proved too hard too soon. Within 2 months of making Good Morning Chia Lincoln was dying. The funeral was tasteful. Link played a beautiful rendition of Taps, and there wasn't a dry eye in the audience February 28, 2011. Thankfully, the grieving process finished quickly thereafter, and a little less than a year later the crew was back for our titular daytime show, Good Mythical Morning. Much like a phoenix giving birth to a stronger offspring from the ashes of its death, Good Mythical Morning felt like a better version of Good Morning Chia Lincoln. And this time, the life cycle of the show wasn't tantamount to the ability of two middle-aged men's ability to take care of a plant. As long as the concept of mourning still existed, there would always be a place for a mythical one. Every day of the work week, our fellows would get together and talk about whatever they'd like that day, sometimes talking about news stories like in Good Morning Chia Lincoln, but other times talking about more personal aspects of themselves. Learning about our guys really helped us connect with whatever they want to talk about, and with them anytime they brought up aspects of their life, whether by accident or complete determination. The very first Good Mythical Morning emblematizes this perfectly. Extremely OCD morning routine establishes the premise of Good Mythical Morning, the idea of it becoming part of a daily routine, the meaning behind the name Good Mythical Morning, and the overall tone of what they want the show to be. Looking back on the first episode again, there's an enduring level of awkwardness where they sometimes talk over each other and go off track. Overall though, it's kind of just strange hearing this without the crew laughing in the background. If you look at Rhett and Link's actual scripted comedy style, however, it makes this all seem a bit more intentional. Not to go off talking about the Rhett and Link brand outside of Good Mythical Morning, or GMM as us cool guys call it, but the best way to describe Rhett and Link's comedy style is actually surrealist and awkward. This would probably come as a surprise to people who only know about Rhett and Link from the first 5 or 6 seasons of GMM, but it makes sense why in the first season there's a great deal of awkward pauses, silence, and just a slight bit of uncomfiness when watching it with a hyper-attentive eye. Now I could definitely be attributing motive to something that's completely unintentional, but it would make sense for them to integrate how they normally make entertainment into this project, especially on the first episode where there isn't an established tone for the show. I don't mean to come across like I don't enjoy the episode or like I believe that this one is an outlier in quality when compared to the rest of the first season, but I do think there's a bit of a tonal shift that needs to take place before GMM can come into its own. Some highlights include Rhett messing up the name of the show, which is basically unthinkable now since they probably say it and think about it constantly nowadays, the introduction of the Wheel of Mythicality, though not by name, and Rhett impersonating Link. It's also fun to see them a little more interactive with the community, mentioning them and asking people to send them suggestions for the wheel. This, of course, was back in the day when they weren't super big people on the internet, and so they are a bit more involved in their niche fan base. Season 1 continues with the fellas picking up basically where they left off with Good Morning Chia Lincoln, talking about news stories such as someone robbing a store using an infection as their instrument of intimidation, and opinions such as the best candy bar. Interestingly enough, the candy bar episode began a long-running series on the channel where they just rank the best of things. Obviously, the concept has evolved over the years, from them just taking viewer comments as the end-all be-all, to them participating in complicated games that determine the victor. How this worked was Rhett and Link would both make their case as to why the best thing was the best thing, and viewers would submit their own cases as to why their favorite thing was the best thing, or provide extra reasoning as to why one of the host's thing was the best thing. The discussion was then brought up on the next episode of the Best Ever series, and the results were tallied, providing a definitive Best Ever. This meant that the results of, say, an episode on the Best Chips Ever would not have a resolution until the next week where they would have another Best Ever to discuss. The Best Ever series concluded with the Best Chips Ever. Thankfully, just that next week when they would normally do a Best Ever episode, they disclosed the results of the last episode, aka the Best Chips Ever, and told their fans they are going to put that format on hold. Most YouTubers probably wouldn't even care that much, and would have just moved on without saying anything, so it's nice that they, even for such a minuscule thing, decided to make their intentions known. In the same episode, they actually begin a format where they specifically talk about whatever random viewers want to talk about. Not to be confused with a Q&A type thing, but, as they call it, mythical perspectives. However, they also only did this format about 4 times before discontinuing it as well, with the last episode of the series being the side effects of reading Rainbow. The following Friday, they introduced the concept of Bring a Friend to GMM Day, and changed the Mythical Perspectives format into a debate theme, the first being fist bumps versus handshakes. Ironically, this kind of devolved back into the original concept, where they would discuss the best things ever again, but ask the community what the best of something was before they made the episode, as opposed to after. This changed the format up a little, because what used to be Rhett and Link arguing for their favorites and then asking the mythical beasts what their favorites were afterwards, became Rhett and Link talking about what the mythical beasts' favorites were as well as their own favorites, and then at the end of the episode bringing up what the next week's topic was. This type of video would last throughout the rest of Season 1, with the last episode of the season even being a best moments of the season episode. Of course, this episode is more of a clip show than the previous ones, and I would have liked to hear their favorite moments instead of just seeing what viewers submitted. You can tell that they're a little standoffish about taking a break, considering they're quick to mention they'd be doing a set of videos called the Rhett and Link Vault during that month-long break they would take, and the fact that Season 1 is one of the longest seasons they've done to date. Not counting the controversial 4-episode format, but we're not going to get to that for a while at this point. Overall, I would say that Season 1 is emblematic of what I would consider the early years period of Good Mythical Morning. A lot of ideas flying around and a lot of just getting to know Rhett and Link. Some of my favorite episodes actually come from this time, and even this season surprisingly, with the episodes where they talk about their life stories being particular highlights. They definitely hadn't fallen into a particular format yet, and we're definitely trying to work things out as to how this show is going to be. Nowadays, every episode has to have some gamification aspect to it, which I'm not really saying is a bad thing, but it does make things feel very predictable, which honestly might be what they're going for now. Back in Season 1, and throughout the whole early years era, no one really knew what Rhett and Link would be doing next. Then again, during all of Season 1 episodes, you can be rest assured that Rhett and Link would be sitting at that table conversing about something, so I guess there is always a sense of predictability to Good Mythical Morning, which might be why it got so popular in the first place. Anyway, the Rhett and Link Vault was pretty interesting. I mean, it kinda just went over old videos they made and talked about them in a behind the scenes kind of style. Nothing too much to go over there, but a fun thing to do in between the seasons. Interestingly enough, it looks like the first episode is unavailable, and I can't find it anywhere, so it looks like we have some lost media! So if anyone has ever seen the extremely obscure and completely irrelevant Rhett and Link Vault Episode 1 video, let us know. Continuing on, Seasons 2 and 3 basically continue where Season 1 left off. Throughout the first few Fridays, we get a glimpse into the mind of Rhett and Link as teenagers, as they read off their extremely stage-directed autobiographical tale by the name of Gutless Wonders. Season 2 is also the first time we see Rhett's children, beta versions do not research, and 3 episodes that do not feature Link, which at this point makes Rhett the winner of the Most Good Mythical Morning Episodes Featured in award. One episode was with Chuck Testa, making him the first ever guest appearance on Good Mythical Morning, one episode with Joe Beretta, making him the second guest appearance on Good Mythical Morning, and one episode with the beta versions of Rhett's children, making Locke the third guest and Shepard the fourth, since Locke is the oldest, so. Locke and Shepard as well as Chuck were pretty big hits, but when Joe came on, people began to miss the chemistry between Rhett and Link that we had grown so fond of. Link also has a pretty crazy mustache for the second half of GMM here, so let's mark this as the first hair-related controversy to hit the series. For those keeping track at home, there are roughly 3 more of these, so keep your scorecards ready. Someone also made puppets of Rhett and Link during this season, so puppets are introduced in the viewer mail episodes. Oh, and they begin viewer mail episodes in Season 2, which is nice. By the way, if you ever want to hear the full extended edition of the viewer mail jingle that plays every time throughout the series when they did viewer mail, you can listen to that here. Oh, I'm not going to post the video or a clickable link or anything like that, so, just take a picture of the link on the screen with your phone and manually type it in letter by letter. Trust me, it's going to be worth it. Finally, let's move on to good old Season 3, which begins the seasons that I would fall asleep to as a college student who's afraid of the dark. This season begins Stevie's long and fruitful tenure as Good Mythical Morning executive producer. Thanks to @VioletE or1143 for your 5-year-old comment that unironically saved me an insane amount of time. In fact, this particular episode, Killing Rhett's Beard, actually began a lot of history. It marks the second of the hair-related controversies that the series would face. Like the ever-reliable VioletE or 1143 says, it's the first episode that Stevie appears in, and it's also the host of a particularly infamous Wheel of Mythicality ending. Never again would the Wheel of Mythicality contain suggestions about slapping each other, and if I had a quarter for each time that the wheel commanded someone to slap someone else, well, I'd have about 3 quarters, but it's strange that it happened that many times. The Book of Mythicality goes into more detail about that event, but my mom is the only one who has that book, and she's very protective of it, so it's debatable if I'd ever be able to claw it from her iron-fisted grip. We also get to see an episode of Link answering a phone call, Rhett providing ASMR commentary for about 6 minutes, and we get to see them move into their new studio, where we meet all the folks currently working there. The only 2 remaining to this date, I believe, are Stevie and Chase. But why the move to a whole new studio, you ask? Well, Rhett and Link have something extremely amazing planned that's sure to be the new face and format of Good Mythical Morning. Let me introduce you all to The Mythical Show! Oh, you haven't heard The Mythical Show? Well, of course, this was a half-hour-long, highly scripted, segment-based studio audience TV-influenced program that ran in between seasons 3 and 4 of Good Mythical Morning. And by half-hour-long, highly scripted, segment-based studio audience TV-influenced program that ran in between seasons 3 and 4 of Good Mythical Morning, I mean they only had a studio audience once. Honestly, given how awkward the audience seems, I wouldn't put it past them to hire a fake studio audience to act as awkward as possible. They would also premiere Rhett and Link content, the channel where they hosted music videos and other creative pursuits before they went all in on GMM, on the show as well. It's really weird to see the Rhett and Link Mimi music content being the draw towards the show back in 2013, rather than the show being the main event like it is now. Besides debuting new music, I'd also like to mention the Forest Patrol, which was a small segment they would show periodically during the episodes. I'd say these were generally the highlight, but overall, the Mythical show was not the success that it was hoped to be. Keep in mind that this was back in the day when YouTubers' big aspirations were to be on TV, since that's where the big money and future was. So in a way, this was kind of like a pitch for how a scripted Rhett and Link brand show would look. Nowadays, we can watch the Mythical show and pretty easily see where it went wrong. Most people really just like listening to Rhett and Link talk about stuff and interact with each other, and they, with no exaggeration, hate when Rhett and Link seem scripted. Thankfully, Rhett and Link are nothing if not receptive towards criticism, so they saw what went wrong with the Mythical show and went full steam ahead with the standard GMM format. And this is where I believe GMM started to pick up, which I call the... Season 4 starts off in a similar fashion to how the last seasons would, with our favorite fellas talking about and discussing a seemingly random topic. Though this time, our more eagle-eyed viewers may notice that the first video is about 3 to 4 minutes shorter than the average GMM. This is because the powers that be thought it would be a good idea to start leaving the mic on for a few minutes after an episode had ended, and upload those few extra minutes separately, in a segment coined Good Mythical More. In the coming years, this would prove to be a wise decision, as many fans nowadays even prefer the Good Mythical Mores over the main episode, due to the unscripted and relaxed nature of it. I even find myself quoting Good Mythical Mores, believing they were part of the main episode, such as the classic "Why Did He Care?" controversy of 2015.
Why does he care?
Why does he care?
Yeah.
Why does he care about what? What are you talking about?
I don't know. I lost my train of thought, and that's the question that came out.
So why does he care?
Or when they had to drink a vegan meat smoothie and they were very clearly just procrastinating the whole time to not have to drink it.
Are you gonna put it in your mouth and swallow immediately, or are you gonna like put it in your mouth and hold it there for a while and...
Haven't thought about it.
However, both of those mores were in Season 7, so we'll have to wait until then to discuss further. During our current era of Seasons 4 and 5, Good Mythical More is a very different beast to what it is now. If you go back and try to find these elusive early day mores, you'll have to go to the original episode and find the link to the episode's more in the description, because in current year they're unlisted. Really though, there isn't much to say about the mores during this era, because they are roughly only 3 to 5 minutes long, and the fellas generally didn't have any sort of set topic they were discussing. They'd mostly just ramble about what immediately came to mind after the episode ended. I will say it's fun to see them completely unscripted and unconfined by any sort of topic, rambling about random stuff. These early mores are the most freeform content you'll probably ever see them do. But at the end of the day, it's just two guys trying to talk about something off the top of their heads for a few minutes. In my opinion, Rhett and Link really shine when there's a slight structure around what they're doing, and when they get some time to play with it for a bit to get comfortable. But these early day mores start to feel like we're getting the first few tracks of a roller coaster before anything interesting starts to happen. That's enough about the mores for now though. We would be hard pressed not to also mention the very cool new set our guys have, with cool knickknacks and props galore. We also have a shiny new Wheel of Mythicality. This set will end up being the design they use even to this day, though with a couple of adjustments here and there as the years went on. There's a lot to say about how iconic this set will become and how it really captures the cozy summer camp feel of the show, so I don't dwell on it too much. Just know that this set change, I believe, played an integral role in GMM's growth and the comfortable niche it was able to find itself in for the years to come. Talking about the episodes themselves though, this is when GMM really starts hitting its stride. The hashtag war is a big fun trilogy where they try to take the hashtag GMM on Twitter from a couple of news outlets. They have the first instance of them eating spicy foods, and there are some personal favorites such as deconstructing the McRib, the Hot or Not challenge, and eating a scorpion, Bug War challenge, the latter becoming their most popular GMM at one point, and remaining the third most popular GMM even to this day. There's a good variety of episodes during this time, including a good deal of food episodes, many story-based episodes, a lot of discussion episodes, and even a few game episodes. These days it seems like every single episode of Good Mythical Morning is a game episode about food, so the variety is welcome. Of course, there are a few episodes that would end up being less iconic, and Season 5 marks another hair-based controversy sadly with Link's beard.
Don't worry, he shaves it within 6 episodes.
That is, until everything changed with the release of one very special episode. Now you may be wondering, hey Connor, are you such a dumb bitch that you accidentally put Season 5 twice, you dummy? And while all that may be true, in this instance I put Season 5 twice for a very intentional reason. Season 5, Episode 82, GMM Episode 437, was the episode where everything for GMM changed. Will It Taco, a Cinco de Mayo celebration that would inadvertently start the biggest and longest running series for Good Mythical Morning. When any layman thinks of Good Mythical Morning, they will, whether for better or worse, think of these Will It episodes. Granted, at the time it was not the absolute most popular episode, and even today it sits at the 10th place for the most popular, so it wasn't this specific episode that throttled them into the starlight, but it was the beginning of an age where GMM was a definitive long-running series that it is today. Not just with the Willets, mind you, but immediately afterwards it was like something clicked, and they were just releasing bangers after bangers. Things really took off during Season 6, however, and I think that the popularity that begun can be emblematized accurately with a change to their intro. In the previous seasons, the intro was a very meek and nice piano with a calm tune, seeming more like a gentle good morning, or a nice welcome to your friends Rhett and Link. But in Season 6, the intro is more brash and loud, with a really interesting semi-realism style. There's also more of a build-up in the beginning, something that drives anticipation as to what they're going to be doing that day. To sum up simply, GMM Season 5 was more welcoming and easing you into the day, whereas Season 6 was more exciting, encouraging you to get up and see what crazy stuff they're going to get into. Neither is worse or better in my opinion, I just wanted to point out the obvious tonal shift. During this time, what can be even said about these episodes? Each one was a perfect blend of structure and looseness. These were crazy fun topics, interesting stories, and most of the memorable and iconic moments stem from these seasons. Episodes themselves are also longer, and this is when the mores start to be really great additions as well. They would always play off the main episode in a really cohesive way, such as the main episode being about sharing food, and the more being about Link's addendums and additions to those rules. More food and more Willets, of course, will be added during this time, where you can see a shift from the Willets being fun and interesting creations that are most of the time really laughably dumb, to being extremely intricate creations thought up by an experienced chef. Personally, I tended to like the older ones where they would just eat 2 chunks of Crown with vanilla ice cream in between them and call it an ice cream sandwich, just because I loved the completely ridiculous nature of it. Stuff would just drip all over and they'd struggle to even take a bite out of the older creations due to how stupid of an idea it was in the first place to try and make a popsicle out of wood chips. I don't know, it all seemed like a lot more of a Rhett and Link style of comedy with how awkward and chaotic it all was, especially compared to how it is today, with Josh making an extremely complicated and gourmet waffle made out of wasabi. Though I can see how it'd be interesting just to see the cool recipes that Josh comes up with, personally I think Rhett and Link's style of comedy worked a lot better when they were just stuffing Lon Johns with Rhett and Link Value Select shaving cream. Nevertheless, these Willets became the bread and butter of the channel, but at this point there were still plenty of other options. Some of my favorites include 8 weird ways to open a bottle, making real food with Play-Doh, and my personal all-time favorite, eating a spinning taco. From my previous statements on the Willet episodes, you can probably assume why I like these ones the most, but if you check out the most popular GMMs, you'll see some overlap, and you'll also see that all the most popular episodes besides one come from this season stretch of 5 to 12, with most of them being from Season 6 specifically. While I do consider all of Seasons 5 to 12 to be the golden era, when GMM was at the height of its relevance and quality in my opinion, I specifically think of Seasons 6 to 8 when I think of the absolute peak of Good Mythical Morning, the Pax Mythicum if you will. During this time, every episode was quality, every more was great, and there were no additional hair-based controversies, which is always a plus. When I was in high school and college, I would always listen to something while I was sleeping, and you can bet that I would constantly go back to that Karen Peterson's GMM plus GM More Season 6 playlist through those sleepless nights. The only thing that I could complain about is that during Season 7, with the first few episodes, they decided to try something new with the editing. Specifically, they would make these little animations and edits to attenuate jokes, but I didn't really like them. This is 100% nitpicky, but I didn't think they were needed at all. And I especially didn't think they needed sound, which took me completely out of the episode, but it's not even worth complaining about, because they stopped doing that very shortly after they started. When Season 9 begins, however, we get another hair-based controversy with Link, and this time, he would plant his flag in the ground and refuse to change back no matter what the comments said. This also begins what I call the teal era, where everything is slightly more brightly color-coded. I'm not really sure why I say the teal era, because it's not really teal. I think I just like hyper-categorizing things. To summarize for the folks who are having a hard time following, there's the Golden Age, which is made up of the latter half of Season 5, up until Season 12. Now, in the Golden Age there are 2 distinct ages, Pax Mythica, which makes up Seasons 6 to 8, and then the Teal Era, which makes up Seasons 9 to 12. Makes sense? Doesn't matter. I just want to clear that up. Moving on, we have another new intro in the Teal era. It's pretty similar to the last intro introduced in Season 6, though any feeling of, hey it's morning, let's begin the day, is replaced with more of an adventurous feel. It's a little more generic in my opinion, and it kinda takes away a bit of the previous tone, but I'm sure that 90% of the reason I don't like it as much is because of nostalgia. This was also, fun fact, the season that I stopped watching GMM every day as they came out. I mean, I always watched them since the Psychopath Smell Test in Season 2, but I only started watching consistently each morning in Season 6. I was also a very active member of the community during this time as well, but during Season 9 I think I just got caught up in school and doing other things, so I wasn't really as interested in watching GMM every day. Granted, I did still watch them, and there are plenty of iconic episodes in this span of seasons 9 to 12, so it's not like I'm complaining or anything, I just wanted to point that out. During this era, they would also do away with a lot of the early season stuff, such as the mail boulder and the museum arc. They would also discontinue answering people's questions online, which took a little bit of that audience interaction away, but I guess I can understand. I mean, as you get more popular, you get too many messages, and it just becomes too much stuff to sort through. And I guess you could just accidentally answer a question from someone who's a Nazi or a racist or someone your fandom could get angry at you for talking about. That didn't happen, I'm just saying it could be something hypothetically that happens. Why are y'all looking at me like that? No, please God, I don't want to talk about controversies just yet. Just let me be happy for once, please. Whether it was because of how great the last few seasons were, or because the show became a lot more professional and well produced during this time, the show just began to feel very different than how it used to. Funnily enough, Season 12 was when I started to watch GMM every day again, just because of how my college schedule worked out, so there are some warm feelings associated with this season. But this was also the time I started to think about this video. I know I've been thinking about this video for 7 years and I'm only just now making it shut up, because I felt something different when watching these two middle-aged men guess what's in each other's pants than I did back in the day, and I just couldn't put my finger on it. Starting off with the new intro, it's pretty cool I guess, I mean just from an artistic standpoint it's cool, but it probably feels the least like a GMM intro I've seen. Even when comparing it to the newest intros from the seasons I've never even watched before, those ones seem to capture the spirit of GMM better than this one does. It kinda just feels like a toothpaste commercial for some reason. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a good toothpaste commercial, but I don't think I've ever watched GMM before and felt that my teeth were dirty. The point is, when compared to Season 11, there seems to be just a shift in tone that we may not be able to put our fingers on for a bit. That is until the second half of Season 12, where we get the infamous 3-episode format age. I mean, just taking a look at the comments, you can see something's wrong here. People are immediately wishing for the old format to be brought back. Folks are saying it all feels scripted, and everyone just seems very awkward. This feeling would persist for a while, with controversy getting so loud that Rhett and Link would address the controversy in a Good Mythical More the next day, after the first 4-episode format came out. If you want to get a feeling of how the 3-episode format was, it was basically 4 slightly shorter scripted segments, with editing that felt a lot like Ellen or The Tonight Show or something you'd see on TV. Jokes really all felt very scripted, and Rhett and Link both seemed like they were trying to hold their tongue, with things not being given time to ruminate, and all the awkwardness being cut out. If you've been paying attention throughout this video, you know the thing that I, and most others loved about Good Mythical Morning, was the awkwardness and chaotic nature of everything. The justification from what I've been told for these changes was that Rhett and Link were approached by YouTube when they were kind of thinking about the future of Good Mythical Morning, and YouTube decided that since Buddy's system was a good success, they would begin to sponsor some of Rhett and Link's Good Mythical Morning content. You can tell because there's a YouTube Originals watermark in the bottom left hand side of the screen on the multi-episode format episodes. Not to get too into the weeds here, but this was a common thing back in the day when YouTube was really pushing their YouTube Red stuff and wanted to try to seem like a streaming service. But to my knowledge, no YouTube original content creators created anything better or even of the same quality as they did when they weren't with YouTube. MatPat did his Game Lab, and ERB made Bruce Banner vs. Caitlyn Jenner, so anyone who partnered with these people didn't come out unscathed, and GMM was no exception. Since Rhett and Link were thinking about what they wanted to do with GMM in the future, with some talks about ending it sometime soon, being approached by YouTube kind of gave them a new invigorated passion for making these, and they wanted to try something new with the format, whether by their own cognizance or YouTube's is up for interpretation. They thought about those shows like The Tonight Show and Conan and all the others that had these short segments that'd be trending on YouTube and be given favor algorithmically, assumedly because normies would watch these segments and share them around with their friends. Now, Rhett and Link thought that this would be the future of how things worked on YouTube, with professional videos being given more favorability and small format videos reigning supreme, and honestly, in retrospect, they were both right and wrong. During the time, however, I believe they made the mistake of thinking that they were completely mainstream. I mean, sure, for greasy computer gremlins like myself, GMM may seem like mainstream content, but when compared to stuff like The Tonight Show, there's just more relevancy in the main TV watching demographic. Now granted, I'm sure that in terms of pure viewership episode to episode, Good Mythical Morning and Rhett and Link would be comparable, if not blow Jimmy Kimmel out of the water. But if you have a clip of Jimmy Kimmel doing something with Rihanna, it's going to be way more shareable in the way GMM was hoping for than a video of Rhett ranting about cats on helium. Nevertheless, Rhett and Link would stick with this format up until season 14. Honestly, after the first few episodes, they start to get a little more comfortable and a little less stiff, but there is always a less intimate feel to the show. I mean, completely absent are any and all stories from their lives, and really any sort of natural discussion about the topics they bring up. The only types of videos that survived the change were food videos, games, experiment videos, which would end up being a mainstay for years to come. Because these were funded in part by YouTube, there also seemed to be no room for error, if that makes sense. If you take a look at my favorite episode, the Spinning Taco episode, you'll see why this sort of episode would have never worked during the multiple segment format era, even though the episode itself consists of 3 segments. During each segment, there was some sort of awkwardness or a moment where things didn't work out, and each and every time it just added to the comedy and chaotic nature of it all. I don't want to just sit here and explain jokes, but I highly suggest you take a look at the episode to see what I'm talking about. However, with YouTube making sure things are spick and span and everything is going how they expect it to, you don't get those real moments where it seems like 2 guys trying out really dumb stuff that clearly doesn't go well. Whether YouTube wanted Rhett and Link to clean everything up, or Rhett and Link wanted to make sure things were more professional since they had more of a budget, there's just a feeling that wasn't there during this time. Thankfully, Google ended that partnership with Rhett and Link, and I say thankfully not because I thought the episodes were particularly awful or anything, but because it took a lot out of both Rhett and Link, and they didn't like the end result much either. Starting season 14, the episodes were back and advertised as a return to the old format of just 1 episode and 1 more. Much like with the Golden Age and the split between Pax Mythica and the Teal era, I believe this concludes the darkest era in GMM history, both in terms of Rhett and Link enjoying the time they were there, and how much the fans enjoyed the episodes. Era 536 as the cool kids call it. No, I will not be explaining why, but if you knew your medieval history, you'd be nodding your head in agreement right now. Anyway, the beginning of Season 14 marks the Middle Ages, which will last until the start of Season 18, which basically means that Season 14 to 18 are pretty good, though not as amazing as the Golden Age, and not as bad as Era 536. Things during this time remained a little stagnant, though there would be a greater emphasis on the crew and our fellows' families, which is nice. We are also greeted with a new segment that occurs on Saturdays by the name of Let's Talk About That, hosted by the long time GMM crew member turned executive producer, Stevie Wynn Levine, who, if we remember, was the hapless victim to Rhett and Link's rage during the slapping controversy. LTAT, as the really cool kids call it, was a pretty interesting segment that went over some pretty interesting things. It seemed to pay more attention to studio goings-ons and external events, rather than GMM, which helped it really stand out. Honestly, seeing Rhett and Link make fun of the old format at the beginning of Season 14 though was so cathartic, especially after the stress they were going through, so that alone gives this season a plus. And they genuinely seem really happy to be back doing the show how they want to again. Something else I'd like to bring up is that Rhett and Link seem to be a bit more comfortable being less family friendly this time around. Sure, in the earlier seasons they would say some funny sex words and be coy about it, but now they're eating nachos infused with an assortment of liquors, joking about how it's making them tipsy. This would quickly become a theme, and honestly I think the hard time they had with the multiple segment era really improved their moods and their looseness when they switched back to the standard format. In Season 15, they even switched up the intro again, which I believe fits the GMM image a lot better than the last one. It has a chill and inviting tone to it again, and it also has this fun exploration summer camp element as well. Personally, I think this is up there with the intro during the Golden Age. All in all, they seemed happy to be the sole owners of the show again, and due to this, start to take the show in some fun directions, though of course there were still some pain points along the way. Some say that the middle era had the most mixed bag of guests, where they would usually have other YouTube folks on, i.e. people who would understand how the format and the goofiness would work. Now we mostly have real-life actors and celebrities. I personally still think that Amy Schumer and Bill Hader's appearance in Season 7 was by far the worst, but these seasons we got Nina Dobrev, Megan Fox, and the only one that was legitimately bad, Max Greenfield. If you don't know the backstory, the concept was basically just frying things and making Super Bowl party foods, which is a pretty solid episode idea I guess. However, Max Greenfield's agent forgot to mention that Max was a vegetarian, and so they had this whole show prepared with tons of meat-based foods, and Max couldn't even participate. He just ended up sitting on the sidelines watching Rhett and Link eat fried wings. This obviously wasn't Rhett or Link or anyone at Mythical Entertainment's fault. However, the casual observer wouldn't know that, and would just think that Rhett and Link just invited the guy on the show and forgot to ask if he was vegetarian or not. I've watched the Nina Dobrev and Megan Fox episodes, and I didn't really have too much of an issue with either of them. I just think folks are very protective of Rhett and Link, and want everyone who goes on the show to be extremely ecstatic that they're on GMM, but some folks just aren't like that. But yeah, I could definitely feel the embarrassment with Max's episode. We also got a few controversies this season as well. In fact, the most amount of controversies if you count the clearly Canadian stuff coming to a head with Scott Kramer's video. To sum that up, Rhett and Link way back in a season 6 episode of Good Mythical More found out that a drink that they enjoyed, which was discontinued, was holding a campaign to bring that drink back. Basically one of those buy a case of the drink to show manufacturers that you're willing to pay for the drink type of deal.
Help us bring back the original Clearly Canadian by pre-ordering a case. They got to get to 25,000 cases to bring it back, and they're currently at 8,200. So this is fate, guys.
What?
This is fate.
It's a Kickstarter campaign?
They were super excited about the idea and immediately got in contact with the folks who are holding the campaign to collaborate. The whole big deal was that you would buy a case of Clearly Canadian, and then once all the Clearly Canadians were shipped out, they would hold this big old live stream for all the folks who got one, and they would all toast a Clearly Canadian being brought back or something like that.
Where we're gonna all toast in unison and drink them for the first time. The new batch of Clearly Canadian. It'll be a Mythical Beast online meetup, invitation only.
The only
if
way
you pledge to the account.
The only way you get the invitation is by getting a case, because you'll put your email address in when you get a case.
Well, as you could expect, this didn't happen. Mostly because of weird shipping delays and some other issues. GMM really never addressed the campaign after shouting it out a couple times on their main Good Mythical Morning episodes. Folks like Scott Kramer were confused about what may have happened since they never got a link or anything to any sort of live stream, and made a pretty respectful and lighthearted video about it, which Rhett and Link left a comment on. The fallout of this all occurred in 2019, which was during season 15, so technically a Dark Age controversy. Now if you want a spicier and more petty controversy, there's also the time that Stevie called renowned conservative goofball Steven Crowder a mean name. The quick backstory on that: basically Rhett and Link relinquished their Christian faith, which I'm not going to touch with a 10-foot pole, guys, and then made videos about their spiritual deconstruction journey on their side podcast channel Ear Biscuits. They definitely didn't say anything about it on GMM, so I won't get into what they said and their justifications, but all you need to know is that Steven Crowder made a relatively tame and respectful, especially compared to his other ones, video talking about where they may have gone wrong, since of course he's a real dogmatic Christian fella. Immediately after this video was released, like 2 days later, GMM released a video of our boys reviewing current day memes. During this episode, the Change My Mind meme is brought up, and when Stevie talks about the originator, our nutty Crowder guy, Stevie calls Crowder a mean name.
Steven Crowder, or as I like to call him, Steven Piece of Crowder.
Rhett and Link then react kind of awkwardly to what Stevie said and brush it off. Steven then comments,
Ha 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 ha. Ha.
Okay, that's about right, yeah.
I guess trying to make it seem like it didn't bother him. I mean, it's not like he's going around watching GMM videos or meme review episodes, so it's clear that he only watched that one because they mentioned him slightly. But, of course, Good Mythical Morning deleted the comment. Then Steven got mad at it, thinking they were silencing him or something.
That's cowardly. It is cowardly to do that and then not allow any recourse. Okay, these are just the ABCs of me. We don't do that on this show.
I'm not really sure why they deleted it. They probably just didn't want to draw attention to Steven, but personally, I think they should just be friends, since both Stevie and Steven have Steve in their names, and they're both gay. Speaking of Rhett and Link's dad meme review episode, it was one of the quarantine episodes that they filmed during COVID. Of course, they had a few episodes in their pocket that they filmed in the studio beforehand, released with a comment clarifying that they weren't breaking CDC guidelines. Now, these COVID episodes were about as good as they could be. Brett and Link fared a lot better than many other talk show hosts because they had a lot of experience making content by themselves, so they played around with the idea of them not physically being together a lot. Eagle-eyed viewers may also notice that Rhett's hair is slowly beginning to change, being less clean-cut and more casual. The same goes for his beard, which used to be very controlled, but now seems to be given more room to breathe. While it may not take full effect until after COVID, this is another for our list of hair-based controversies. Though Rhett had the right idea, just slowly letting his hair grow out over time, rather than Link who just went to town on his hair one episode and refused all criticism. Overall, the Dark Ages exemplified one thing with Rhett and Link, and the thing that makes them stand out from any other super corporate YouTube channel. They clearly care about what people think about the show, and they want to be as good as it can be. They really seem to care about holding on to that intimate and fun, unexpected feeling as much as we want them to, which is honestly a really surprising thing. People may not know that Rhett and Lynne are basically the most lucrative YouTube business on the platform. Like, sure, there are some weird AI robots that are churning out videos decided by an algorithm to get the most clicks, but in terms of business and lucrativeness of branding, no one really compares with Mythical Entertainment. And for Rhett and Lynne to still be like, oh yeah, our people who enjoy Good Mythical Morning don't like this, and then change things back, or for them to see that things are going in a weird direction and then try to avoid that happening is really, really special. I mean, on Scott Kramer's video, they commented and went into pretty good detail about what happened with the Clearly Canadian thing, so obviously they'll pay attention to what the community says, and I think that's really kept them alive throughout the years. Of course, that can also be kind of a detriment, not only to their mental health, but to how they respond to things. There were many a times where guests would come on the show and the community would be goofs towards them, so GMM would put out a statement telling people not to harass people who were on the show, or where they would put out a statement telling people to be nicer to the crew and staff on social media. Which, I mean, I understand if you're just trying to keep people from being mean to guest stars and put the show in a bad light, but sometimes it feels like you're giving the harassment a little more legitimacy than it has when you're always trying to quell the fan base. This is very much a personal thing, but when I'm watching a video and I scroll down to the comments and see that there's a pinned comment about not harassing the guest, the first thing I'm doing is scrolling through the comments and finding the comments that are being mean, and then I'm scrolling through the video finding the sections that the comments describe that the guest was being bad during. Which is funny because out of context I'll generally agree with the comments when I'm looking at the little snippets they mark, but when I'm actually watching the video, I think the guest is completely fine. So in a roundabout way, when you address that stuff, it makes you pay more attention to the stuff that's going on, which I'm sure is not what GMM intends. Though it's not like this is a very big problem. I mean, I think Rhett and Lynne and Good Mythical Morning overall are amazing at addressing criticism. Probably the best I've ever seen a YouTube channel address it. I think during the tail end of the Dark Age, the largest ideological shift occurred in Rhett and Lynne when it came to Good Mythical Morning. Funnily enough, I think the multiple segment format days caused them to have a renewed interest in the show, and they really started to think differently about everything. While we see glimmers of this happening around season 16 and 17, it wasn't until season 18 that we would officially get the To say that there's a tonal shift from season 17 to season 18 would be an understatement. The fellas just seem happier, they're more upbeat, and they seem like they're just overall more comfortable with how GMM is now. This more comfortable feeling is best encapsulated by another new intro! Yay! This intro is probably my favorite since the Golden Age, though it's also the most different from the other ones and goes in a completely different direction. Since season 6, the intros have gotten more and more upbeat and exciting, with more of a build-up and quicker music beats, but here, they actually take a step backwards, making the intro calmer and more peaceful than the others. Honestly, it's the most comparable to the first real intro they had, not counting that weird toast intro they had in the beginning, where it had the piano and the xylophone slowly easing you into the show, and while it's a bit more energetic than that, it's still able to hold on to that very casual vibe that the previous intros were missing. From this point to season 21, I believe we're in the Good Mythical Morning renaissance. New ideas are taking hold, new fans are coming in, and the show has officially changed from a family-friendly morning show to a casual teen and adult-oriented daily show. While this is still a transitory era and things aren't completely set in stone, I believe this is the best set of seasons since the Golden Era, even though they aren't necessarily 100% comparable. Of course, we still don't have them talking about random topics or stories from their lives anymore, though you can listen to Ear Biscuits if you want to hear that now, and we have more of a structure to how the show works. I think a lot of the ideological shifts when it came to the show worked to its benefit. Do you remember when I was listing off my absolute favorite episodes and I mentioned making real food with Play-Doh toys? Well, there's this one particular part that kept that episode from being my all-time favorite.
Your pedo wiener. Like I gotta support it. That probably was not something you want to say again.
There's just something about that interaction where Rhett seems a little bit short and irritated at Link. It just took me out of it for a bit. It wasn't like anyone was genuinely upset or it derailed the whole episode, and of course Jason was laughing in the background the whole time, but it just feels a little bit like, hey, genuinely don't say this, we're not supposed to say this. I really doubt this interaction would happen today since they've stopped trying to do the super clean family friendly stuff. In fact, they would most likely play into it for a bit, which would definitely counteract the tension a little. Moving on to the types of episodes you can see in this era, the concepts are probably the most varied they've been. They have some long-running concepts like discontinued snacks and what's the best blank, but they also have some more complicated experiments and comparison videos. I mean, it's fair to say that Good Mythical Morning is basically a food tasting and game channel now, but there isn't necessarily anything wrong with that. We really couldn't have had 20 seasons of Rhett and Link just talking about completely random topics in their lives. It just wouldn't be sustainable, and they probably would have had to start making things up.
It's like, why don't you guys go back to what the show was initially? Just two guys, two friends talking to each other. Well, you guys, we're way past that. We've been past that for a number of seasons. And the very simple reaction to that is we didn't want to do that 5 times a week. That's not what we wanted to do.
It's funny
and we quickly ran out of stories to tell and things to talk about and needed things to do.
They also have seemed to stop having as many guests on the show as they would before, either because the consensus on guest episodes have always been mixed, or because there were always issues and it just presents too many challenges. Personally, I believe Rhett and Link have stopped trying to make their show quote-unquote bigger in a sense. Sure, they're always trying to do new things and get better at running the show, but part of me believes they've accepted the size GMM has gotten to, which is obviously huge, and decide to just stick with their core audience. This could also play into why they started to get a little more adult. The folks who grew up watching Good Mythical Morning are now fully fledged adult humans, and while the old types of episodes are amazing, partially for nostalgic reasons, if GMM were to keep everything family friendly, they probably would have fallen into the trap that most family friendly content falls into, where it all just becomes corporatized mush designed to sell glitter glue substances. As I said in the beginning of this video, Rhett and Link have always had a very weird and surreal sense of humor, which doesn't always translate to family friendly, and definitely doesn't translate to corporatized assembly line videos. This shift to adult content is no better symbolized than with the release of Good Mythical Evening in Season 20 for Mythical Society members in pay-per-view. I didn't mention it earlier, but if you don't know, the Mythical Society is basically a mythical entertainment Patreon, though it isn't hosted on Patreon. Basically, you pay some money each month to get access to some exclusive behind-the-scenes content, extra videos, and you also get a discount in the store, which is pretty cool. Anyway, the idea of Good Mythical Evening was basically what you would expect. It was a fun, R-rated experience where everyone would drink and have a really nutty time. Some say that it got a little too wild though, because Link ended up drinking more than folks expected. So Stevie had to cut Rhett off early to make sure they could actually run a show, and not just be blubbering and seizing on the floor from alcohol poisoning. There were a few more after that, with the second one having some connection issues, and I'm sure there'll be more, but the consensus is that nothing will top that chaotic nature of the first one. Overall, seasons 18 to 20 could be summed up with the beginning of an ideological shift in Good Mythical Morning. From a family-friendly morning show that was always trying to break into the mainstream, whether for better or for worse, to an edgier, more relaxed show that was more focused on its core fan base, rather than trying to be something more than it was. It was with this realization that finally brings us to the... Good Mythical Morning is one of the most iconic and longest running series on YouTube, and is still going strong. It's probably the most comparable to a nostalgic show that exists on this platform, with comments going back to Season 1 talking about how much they've grown since the show came out, and how much Rhett and Link have grown with it. Seasons went from one 10-minute program a day, to a 20-minute weekend program, to a 7-minute episode and a 4-minute after program, to 4 10-minute segmented programs, to 2 10-minute episodes a day. We even got the release of an exclusive adult-oriented program, which I'm sure would not be even in the minds of Rhett and Link back in 2012. We've had fan mail, bring a friend to GMM Day, answering comments, dreams, personal stories, comparison videos. We've even had live episodes, even one from a barbecue restaurant. And throughout it all, though many things have changed, the basic idea has always stayed the same. Rhett and Link have been making episodes of Good Mythical Morning with very little break every single day, and sure, while we've had times where we stopped watching the show, had points where we were irritated with how things were going, or just became bored of the overall format, there's always going to be a part of us who watch that was shaped by Good Mythical Morning. With the release of Season 21 on January 10th, 2022, came the release of a wholly new, though strangely familiar Good Mythical Morning. As Rhett states in the episode, this episode marked the 10th year of Good Mythical Morning, the 2089th episode of the show. It's no wonder the intro of this season makes reference to the very first Good Mythical Morning episode, because while this season marks a whole new beginning for the show, stripping away the fancy new lights, crazy new hairstyles, and more populated studio, we have two friends sitting at a table talking about bacon.
Well, it feels pretty great when you can wrap 10 years up into just a couple of minutes.
Here's to Good Mythical Morning, and here's to you for watching this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Love you all, smooches, and I will see all you in the next video. Goodbye.
And it was unspoken a lot of times, what it is we were working towards. Because, it didn't exist. So, I give us a lot of credit that with no path, with no instruction manual, we still found a way to stick with it. We're gonna get together. We have these isolated events, and we're gonna obsess about them. And that was fun and fulfilling.
And I hope it can be encouraging for people, because again, it doesn't have to be the case. If you've got a job right now, you're working, doing something. First of all, make the most of what it is that you're doing, and find as much joy as you can in it. But maybe there's something.
Meet a Nigerian.
But maybe
get married.
There's something that is a point of passion that you don't necessarily understand how that could even be a career, and maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just a really awesome hobby.
Yeah.
But I just think it's important to see that thing like a little plant.
Yeah.
And that plant needs things. That plant doesn't need to be put into the attic and covered, because it will die.
Give it a little something.
And you'll have to find a new seed somewhere.
Right. Give it a little something all along the way.
If you just keep giving it, you keep feeding it in some way, you don't know what it will grow into.
Yep.
You have no idea, but you got to keep feeding it.
If you don't kill it, it can grow into something. Boy, that ended on a motivational speech. I like that.
That involved a plant.
Yeah.